You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what's really going on in AFPAC? We have Afghanistan. If you wanted to use the metaphor of the United States, Afghanistan is sort of like the Midwest. Off to the west in California, you have Iran. To the north, you've got the STAN countries, Turkmenistan, enormous amounts of gas, Uzbekistan, some oil, Tajikistan. Off to the east coast, the close-in east coast, you've got, of course, Pakistan, all the way down to the south, down to Texas. And then the Mexico and the far eastern states would be India and China. Afghanistan, very strategically located. Pakistan, in the midst of this. Pakistan, China, India. This region has arguably as much as 40% of the world's population. It's a powder keg. Pakistan is a nuclear-armed country. India is a nuclear-armed country. They've historically been rivals. And we have now a hot war that President Obama essentially declared last night. And there are a bunch of cooler wars going on as well. Jeremy Scahill is with us, a reporter for The Nation and author of just some brilliant reporting. My favorite, Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army, a must-read book. Blackwater, of course, has renamed itself ZXE. Jeremy's website, rebelreports.com, well worth checking out. And Jeremy, welcome back to our program.
It's great to be back with you, Tom.
Thank you. Your most recent piece for The Nation was titled Blackwater's Secret War in Pakistan Revealed. I want to get into the details of that with you, but I'm curious, before we get into those details, your take on the President's speech last night and how this all relates to the research that you've been doing on the military-industrial complex that's most visible manifestation is Blackwater.
Well, I mean, I think that first off, what we need to say is that this new strategy by the President is going to represent an incredible amount of profit for the corporations that have benefited from day one of the launch of the so-called War on Terror, which President Obama has now renamed. While there's a lot of focus on the issue of the 30,000 troops that the President said are going to begin deploying in the next couple of months, let's remember that right now in Afghanistan there are 68,000 U.S. troops and 74,000 people that are classified as contractors. These are people that work on the U.S. government payroll for for-profit corporations like KBR, Blackwater, DynCorp, Bechtel, Armor Group. Those individuals are part of a shadow army that's actually bigger than the U.S. military. And what we have seen, the trend that has developed over the past 8 or 9 years, is that the contractors deploy in equal or greater numbers to the U.S. troops that are deployed. So what we're seeing now is not the prospect of 100,000 American soldiers next year in Afghanistan, but in fact 200,000 U.S.-funded personnel that are made up of both military and corporate forces. So this is a really disturbing continuation of the radical privatization of war that was put on steroids by the Bush-Cheney administration.
Well said. It seems to me that if we want to work in a region like this and we want to bring peace and stability to it, we should be doing the Greg Mortensen 3 cups of tea, build schools, build hospitals strategy, rather than the drop bombs, kill people, find the bad guys, particularly if the bad guys don't think of themselves as bad guys, they think of themselves as nationalists defending their homeland strategy. That seems a dead end to me. My take on what was said last night is that it was the equivalent of Nixon's plea for just a little more time in Vietnam. He called it a decent interval. Obama is calling it 2 years or 18 months or whatever it is. But the contractors that you just named, none of them, to the best of my knowledge, have much expertise in building schools. Most of them are people who walk around with guns, are they not?
Right. Well, no. In fact, most of the contractors that are deployed there are deployed in a logistical capacity, but all of them, Tom, are doing jobs that traditionally would have been done by uniformed U.S. soldiers. Right. There's no accurate accounting of the breakdown between the armed and the unarmed contractors, but the fact of the matter is that the number of armed contractors in the country really create a situation where you have a parallel paramilitary force that essentially is not accountable to the U.S. Congress. And the Afghan government has been encouraged to use its own private forces that are being trained by the U.S. So the whole thing is really a mess that's spiraling further out of control. One thing to add to what you said, though, when you brought up President Nixon, Tom, and I know you're a great student of history, I thought one of the weakest parts of the president's speech last night was his attempt at pushback on the comparisons between Vietnam and Afghanistan, saying explicitly that the United States is not facing a sort of indigenous popular uprising. I think that all of the indications that we're getting now is that the popularity of the insurgency, so to speak, is in fact spreading as a direct result of the expansion of U.S. operations in Afghanistan and the drone bombing campaign and the covert operations that are being waged in neighboring Pakistan.
Yeah, I've often made the point, in fact, back during the Bush administration, when George Bush was president, as much as I despised the man, both personally and politically, that if Canada were to have decided that Bush was had stolen the 2000 or 2004 elections, or both of them, and the Canadian government had invaded the United States to liberate us from Canada, I'd probably be out there in the streets trying to fight off the Canadian Army. No country likes being occupied, and that's what we're seeing here is an occupation. The flip side of that, and the way to deal with that, I guess, is to sneak into a country and secretly assassinate people, which brings me to your story about Blackwater's secret war in Pakistan. Is that the slick trick that they're trying to pull off? The equivalent of Canada coming in the U.S. and saying, "Okay, we'll take out parts of the Bush administration to save the country." Well, we're going to send Blackwater into Pakistan.
Well, what we have here in Pakistan, Tom, is a situation where Blackwater is working on a classified contract with the Joint Special Operations Command, the Elite Special Forces Division of the United States military. Beginning under the Bush administration, Dick Cheney and Scooter Libby and Paul Wolfowitz and others essentially segregated JSOC from the rest of the military and made it essentially a standalone operation that was reporting directly to Cheney rather than the U.S. military chain of command. As part of that segregation of this force from the broader U.S. military, they began using contractors like Blackwater on some of their most sensitive operations. And what I'm reporting on in The Nation is that Blackwater for years has been at the center of U.S. covert operations in Pakistan that are not limited only to the drone bombing campaign, but also to helping to do targeted assassinations, and they're developing action plans, in fact, Tom, for JSOC operators to then carry them out on the ground. And what I was told by a well-placed military intelligence source is that many of the Blackwater operatives do not have the required security clearance to be doing what they're doing, and so they're giving rolling security clearances to participate in these black ops, meaning that they have access to information that our elected officials, including officials on the Intelligence Committee, don't have any access to. So this is an absolute scandal. It's happening parallel to the CIA's clandestine operations there, and it's even worse in some ways because it's not even being briefed to the Congress.
And the point of all this is what, Jeremy? We're talking with Jeremy Scahill and rebelreports.com, his website. What is the argument that's being made for doing this?
Well, beginning in 2006, for all I know it may have started earlier, but we know that in 2006 the Bush administration struck a deal with then-President Pervez Musharraf that allowed U.S. Special Forces teams to cross the border from Afghanistan into Pakistan to, quote, follow the target. In other words, if they were tracking Osama bin Laden or one of his top deputies, this is the official line on it, that the Pakistanis would allow the U.S. Special Forces to go into Pakistan on the condition that the Pakistani government would deny it and would in fact condemn it. So what we have here is calculus on the part of the administration that Al-Qaeda and the Taliban are strongest in Pakistan, and the United States is basically saying, screw Pakistani sovereignty, we're taking them out in your country.
Oh, that's going to work out really well. Jeremy Scahill, rebelreports.com, his book Blackwater, The Rise of the World's Most Powerful Mercenary Army. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Tom.